Good morning. Welcome to our online event, Meet the LA County New Movement Disorder Specialists. Today, we are so fortunate to have talented MDS neurologists from our diverse Los Angeles institutions. From Cedars, Sinai, we have Dr. Amir Badiei. From UCLA, we have Dr. Katy Cross and Dr. Katherine Fu. From USC, we have Dr. Xenos Mason, who's also a member of our medical advisory board at PCLA. We have Dr. Emily Tamadonfar and Dr. Katherine Wong. And we'll also be joined later during the Q&A by Dr. Christy Huang from Los Angeles Veterans Association. So we've got a wonderful, diverse group here. I'm Patrick Lasasso, president of PCLA's board of directors. For those of you who don't know who we are a nonprofit that supports families living with Parkinson's through free educational programs like this one, online and in-person support groups, social events, and more. Today's conversation is brought to you by PCLA and our generous sponsor, Medtronic. And let's not forget, our work is primarily sustained by vital donations from people just like you in the Parkinson's community. If you appreciate our work, please consider making a donation at PCLA.org. Your donation is 100% tax deductible, so thank you in advance. We rely on your generosity to help us continue this important work. A few quick notes before we get started. We are recording today's event and we'll be posting it to our growing PCLA YouTube channel, which is an incredible resource, by the way. It contains informative and diverse presentations on improving your life with PD. Check it out and subscribe if you haven't already. There are only about 660 movement disorder specialists in the United States. That may sound like a lot, but it's really not, especially when you consider that current estimates are potentially 1 million people in the US live with Parkinson's. Sometimes it can be a challenge to find and connect with an MDS neurologist, so we wanted to help you do just that. Please join me in welcoming our doctors. Today, we're here to learn a little bit about who these folks who have chosen the discipline of neurological medicine are, why they decided to pursue a career and change the lives for the better through science, advancing medical strategies, and compassion. But in their role treating the Parkinson's community, I can only imagine that it comes with challenges as well. So we gather today to meet these doctors, learn about them as individuals, and how the work they do shapes their approach and practice. So, doctors, I will ask each of you to speak to the topics we provided in advance, and we might have some surprise questions as well. And we're going to go alphabetically, starting with Dr. Amir Badiei from Cedars Sinai. So welcome, Dr. Amir. Please introduce yourself. And our first question that we'll ask all the doctors as well are, in your work with the Parkinson's community, can you share an experience that has given you hope or inspiration?
Okay, so yeah, my name is Amir Badiei. I'm one of the neurologists with Cedars Sinai with the medical group. I'm a movement disorder specialist, and I completed my fellowship at UC San Francisco 2 years ago and have been here since then for the most part. So one of the things that, the experiences that have given me hope and inspiration, there's many of them, but the ones that stand out the most are when people have been going undiagnosed or undertreated for a long time. And, and you kind of make that first confident diagnosis and you start, you give them an explanation for why this is going on and you're able to help quickly due to all of the therapeutics we have. One particular patient was someone who had come from abroad and had been dealing with a terrible Parkinsonian tremor for a decade, and no amount of medication really helped. And we did DBS, and he said it felt like you took a demon out of my body, and so that was one standout, I guess. I could answer for that.
That's awesome. Let's move to Dr. Katy Cross.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katy Cross, and I'm one of the movement disorders doctors at UCLA. I did all my training at UCLA, and I grew up in the LA area, so I'm very happy to be serving all of you in LA as well. An experience, hope, and inspiration. I think that all of us probably as movement disorders doctors have stories like that, where there's a therapy that really changes the life in just an unmatched way. And this question brought to mind a similar experience with a really bad tremor in a young man who couldn't work and had lost a lot of his livelihood. And DBS really changed his life, and he's working and back on his feet. And that's always really inspiring. And I think inspires hope because of sort of the obvious life-changing life-changing treatments that we do have. But I think one of the things that inspires me also is sort of the opposite situation. We have multiple things that we're not as good at treating, right? We have some gait problems, balance problems, cognitive problems, fatigue, you know, all these symptoms a lot of people struggle with that we don't always have so much success with. And that side of the spectrum really inspires me too, because I do a lot of research and I am really inspired by patients who are able to you know, cope with those things and get through those things. And that inspires me to improve our treatments. And so in my work, I'm really trying to understand how those symptoms are related to the disorders in the brain and how we might target those therapies through neurostimulation or other things. So I'm really inspired by both ends of the spectrum, the people who are suffering from things we're not as good at treating, and watching those people just thrive and overcome those symptoms despite their difficulty.
So it's wonderful. Dr. Katherine Fu.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Katherine Fu. I'm also one of the providers at UCLA Neurology. I grew up in Orange County and then proceeded to do the rest of my neurology training and movement disorders fellowship at UCLA. So really glad to be staying on and have the opportunity to continue to care for Parkinson's disease patients. One of the things that really inspired me working with this community, I think, you know, since Medtronic is sponsoring this, I think a lot of us are really moved by the DBS cases we've seen. And certainly that was probably one of the reasons why I ended up choosing movement disorders as a specialty. I remember a young onset Parkinson's patient that I saw for initial evaluation, just like really, you know, significant dyskinesias, bumping into things, falling out of chairs, just really had a lot of difficulty living his life and kind of functioning from day to day. And then after his implant, really restored his quality of life to a significant degree. DBS stands for deep brain stimulation. Thanks very much for the question. And so I really like movement disorders. I really like this population because we have, you know, quite a few therapies now that can really treat symptoms and really restore quality of life. One of my, I guess, kind of like pet peeves was when people used to tell me that neurology was the specialty of diagnose and adios. And that's really not the case anymore. I think there's a lot of breakthroughs that are up and coming and that we can really share and make a difference in the lives of our patients.
That's wonderful. Well, I've never heard that saying. That's terrible. Oh my gosh. Okay, Dr. Xenos Mason, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, and it's nice. I just want to thank you, Patrick and Judy and Vivian and Medtronic, you know, everybody that helps to organize these. I think these sorts of events just really speak to the importance of community, and that's really what PCLA seeks to build. And I think what we're all seeking to build as providers to try to serve as a home and a hub to build on the community. So you know, and actually sort of all the MDs on this call, you know, I'm connected to all of you in different ways and through different stages of my own training. Some of you are working now, and some of you I've known for 5 or 10 years. So it's sort of a nice thing to all come together. Anyways, my inspiration, it really, you know, happens every day. What really I find so special is just the small moments of people's lives that we get to bear witness to. And one of my recent memories is a relatively young man with Parkinson's disease who had a wedding coming up. And, you know, we were talking about this for months, and I ended up meeting his partner, and we made a couple of adjustments and talked about how the wedding would go. And I think gradually, you know, through a few medical things, but really just some time and personal things, he got to have a relatively normal wedding. And that was just really special and important to him. So it's the small moments for me, I think, more than any particular. But we're just so lucky as a group of providers to be able to know people for a long period of time and to get these insights.
That's a beautiful story, and I think we've all come across and seen the value of your relationship with your patients and how much it means to them and to you. It's that one-on-one is life-saving and life-changing many times. So let's move on to Dr. Emily Tamadonfar. I hope I did that okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Emily Tamadonfar, and it's so nice to be able to join my colleagues at USC and also other providers from throughout the area and to meet all of you. I have, a similar story to my colleagues where a patient that has really stuck with me throughout the years was a young onset Parkinson's patient, and she had a very young child at home and had been sort of passed around in the system. And so being able to give her a diagnosis and get her on treatment to kind of be able to re-engage with her family and be the kind of mother that she wanted to be to her child. So that has sort of stuck with me and remained with me over the years through my training. And one thing that has really inspired me through those kind of stories is, as some of my colleagues mentioned, just the kind of community that sort of rallies around caregivers and just the multidisciplinary care. So having a team I have found to be really impactful for some of these patients, and my colleagues inspire me as well as my patients and their families. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know all of you.
That's great. Dr. Wong.
Hi there.
Yeah.
So my name's Katherine Wong. I'm also movement disorder trained. I did my training at UCSF with Dr. Badiei. So it's good to see you, Amir. And I'm from Los Angeles. So after fellowship and residency up at UCSF, I've relocated down to USC, where I'm having it's a really good fit for me. Similar to everyone, I agree, we can make some really important symptomatic benefits in people with Parkinson's disease. I think another thing that really inspires me is kind of the diversity and creativity with which Parkinson's patients approach their medications, their care, and problem solving for their own life. I really take a collaborative approach to working with my patients, and it matters very much to me, kind of your experimentation with what you find helps or doesn't help, or things that make things worse. And I really hope to partner with patients to kind of work through the most important symptoms, the most bothersome symptoms. And so when I see that patients are really open to that and work on their own creative solutions and kind of problem solve in their daily lives, it's really inspiring. And in particular, for example, in fellowship, I took care of a gentleman with really bad freezing of gait, which many of you may know is difficult to treat with medications alone. And he figured out on his own that if he carried around a little bouncing ball in his pocket every time he had freezing, if he kind of threw the ball out in front of him, just the reflex of wanting to catch the ball could get him out of a freezing episode. And I think that's a really interesting example of something that I probably wouldn't have thought of on my own, but the kind of stick-with-itness and the creativity of the patient really led to a solution that worked for him. And I learned from that solution as well. So that, I think, is a really remarkable element of this patient community.
That's a great example of cueing. Was the ball on like a rope or like a spring, a rubber band or something?
It was actually not. He was just fast enough that he could get it. So yeah.
That's great. That's an awesome story. I love that type of stuff. So I guess we'll go back around again for now. We may just break off and keep it and make it a little more informal when we get to the live questions. But let's go back to Dr. Amir. Are there lessons you have learned from this community that have surprised you?
Surprised, I would say kind of more inspired in terms of in a community sense. It kind of dovetails with what Dr. Wong was saying, which is the amount of curiosity in the community. And, I've done these meetings before in Northern California with the VA, and the amount of people who show up and the variety of questions that you get about everything from diet, should I eat kimchi or sauerkraut? Like everybody's researches and investigates their condition to a degree where there's no shortage of things to talk about during a visit, which is one of the reasons, I think most of us leave plenty of time in the visit so we can get to every question. But the level of sort of curiosity and investigation that goes on just across the whole community is more than I've seen with other types of patients that I see. yeah, that part has surprised me coming out of initially training.
That's beautiful. Dr. Cross.
I think from a book, you always know that, you know, you have to treat every patient as an individual person. And I think there's nowhere that is more clear to me than in Parkinson's disease, where, you know, you can see three people who look exactly the same to me objectively and on whatever scales or numbers I'm supposed to assign. And then you talk to them and, you know, one person is not affected at all by something that really is, you know, bothering or interfering with somebody else's life. And so sort of getting at that sort of teamwork that we all have to do to be successful here is, I think that it has really been enlightening, just getting to know people. And the only way to succeed in helping everybody live the best quality of life is to understand what it is that's getting you down and what is getting in the way for you. And so just, you know, that is another thing that I love about movement disorders, is that you can't do it without getting to know your patients. And that's just a really meaningful part of practicing.
That's great. Dr. Fu.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. You know, I've been so kind of pleasantly surprised and inspired by the resilience of this community, in spite of all the kind of day-to-day challenges they may experience with, you know, timing medications with meals or dyskinesias or, you know, off symptoms. But one of the things that I think also sort of pleasantly surprised me was the nature of like multidisciplinary treatment with this community. I think it's really important to, you know, involve our physical therapy colleagues, occupational therapy, speech therapy, sometimes neuropsychologists, neuropsychiatrists, and really build like a robust care team as much as possible. I know it's not always possible depending on access and resources, but I think it's always kind of a goal and an ideal to strive for. And I really look forward to trying to work with, you know, an excellent care team to deliver really quality care to the community.
You know, that's so important. And I have to say, I've been in the community for 20 years, and that has not always been the case in terms of assembling the care team. And it's really nice to hear you speak to that, and all of you have that appreciation for having, you know, informing your patients that they need to have that diverse group around them that support what their needs are, and they're diverse in many the needs. Dr. Mason.
So I would say, I guess, one thing at the level of the person and one thing at the level of the community. So it's just amazing to me how much you can learn about Parkinson's disease and the brain and the mind from just every interaction you have with people. And asking questions and listening carefully to people, you really get so much insight. So that's been a surprise. I mean, I probably should have known that through training, because we're told that all the time, but you just really have to maybe experience it to understand how profound it can be. The other thing about the community here that I think I've learned from switching from the west side to the east side is how different little pockets of Los Angeles can be geographically, culturally, and in terms of the way that they approach their care and how they understand Parkinson's disease and their health. So I think as a community, it's going to be important for us to come together around that idea, you know, at PCLA and you know, in Los Angeles, and just make sure that we're recruiting all these different kinds of ideas, philosophies, and that we understand the differences between these communities.
There really seems to be a common theme between all of you, and I'll just share briefly. When I meet with someone who has just had a good doctor's appointment, the common things you hear are, he spent or she spent this much time with me. I was so excited about that, and they listened to me. And those are the things that those two observations that I think really are indicative of a good, healthy experience at the doctor's office. So let's go to Dr. Tamadonfar.
So I would echo some of these comments. Yeah, I think I was most surprised by, you know, how much of the visit, particularly in Parkinson's disease, that, you know, we talk about non-motor symptoms. So, and how medication is really only one piece of the puzzle. And so building your team, I think, is critical. And as Dr. Mason was mentioning, you know, the cultural differences and how individualized every patient is. And it's really imperative to kind of understand where, you know, your patient is coming from and figure out how to kind of guide them based on their background and what their hopes and expectations are. So that time that we spend in the clinic visit is just so critical, and having the time to dedicate to those conversations is really imperative.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Wong?
Hi. Something that has surprised me in working with Parkinson's patients over the years is what symptoms people don't want treated, or kind of the balance between when a symptom becomes bothersome enough to take another pill or to do something about it, and how that balance is different for everyone, and how some people will tolerate certain things because they just really don't like medications, and other people's level of wanting kind of an intervention is different. And so that's always surprised me, just the variability in how people kind of approach these symptoms. But I'm here for it. You know, I won't like make you take something if you don't want it. There are a few hard stops for me where if this is happening, we absolutely need to do something about it. But for the most part, it's a conversation.
That's great. So we'll go back around. We're almost done with the pre-questions. We're going to open it up to the community here, but I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you cared to share a fun fact about yourself, a hobby, a favorite food. Just get a little funky here. Share something about yourself if you like to, and then I'm going to also give you an opportunity to share any message that you want to with our community. But we'll start with the fun fact or hobby.
Well, one of my hobbies is I play classical piano, and I'm pretty sure I annoy my neighbors a fair amount because it's like Prokofiev is my favorite composer, so it's like 20th century modern music. I'm practicing badly in my house, and yeah, so there's that, and also I love to boogie board, even though it's a little bit childish compared to surfing. I stick by it.
That's awesome, Prokofiev. I was going to ask you your favorite composer is. That's a packs a wallop. Let's go to Dr. Cross.
Fun fact. I am a lifelong soccer player, although I don't play anymore. And I guess my latest hobbies in the throes of toddler childcare are native California gardening. So very excited about low water but cool gardens. And
Awesome.
letting toddlers water plants is a very effective means of entertainment.
Yes. Dr. Fu?
Yeah, so I have a 6-month-old now, so I feel like my free time for hobbies has dramatically diminished. So I had to reconsider what I do in my free time now. And so I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks, you know, things I can listen to on my commute or washing the dishes. And one of my favorite authors is Adam Grant. He also has a podcast. He's an organizational psychologist and really kind of promotes like rethinking and, you know, are there things that we're doing kind of every day or assumptions that we have, and how can we rethink, you know, what we're doing or how we think. So yeah, he's one of my favorites.
That's great. And let's just do this. Would you provide us his podcast? And when we send out our, because when we get these comments, people will often refer, I want to know who that was, and we'll put it on the recap email for people to check out. Dr. Mason.
I think I have too many hobbies as a unfortunately it takes too much time. I'm always pulled in different directions. But we just bought a new house, and on the theme of gardening from Katy, at the side of the house, there used to be, I think, a bunch of rose bushes, and they were all cut down, and the landscaping was redone in a way that I completely disagree with. So I'm trying to change a few things. And some of these roses have come back from rootstock, and with no watering, are just sort of like thriving at the side of the house. So I've decided to learn a little bit about rose cultivation, and so that's been my recent learning experience of trying to take care of these roses that are living despite the dry environment, that they're just like bursting with life. So, you know, I got to keep my life.
That's great. Dr. Tamadonfar.
So one of my hobbies, actually, I did competitive Taekwondo, so martial arts, for some time. And so I don't do it so much anymore, at least not competitively, but up through high school and a little bit of college, I did that competitively, broke my nose, got a number of injuries, but it was really wonderful.
So not only a doctor, you could be a bodyguard if necessary. Dr. Wong.
It's so interesting to hear that there are so many gardeners among us. I think there must be something about the process of gardening and the kind of personality type of being a neurologist that is complementary. But gardening is also my main hobby. I am fully obsessed with growing tomatoes, and tomato season goes from like February to October because I grow from seed and I research seeds in the interim, and I grow over 20 plants a year because I'm all about variety. So I do a lot of heirloom varieties. I go for variety, not quantity. And then every summer with some other tomato gardeners, if possible, we have a tomato tasting event where we try and compare the different tomatoes, and they are remarkably different from each other. So there are some doubters that come, they think that all the tomatoes are going to taste the same, but they don't. And then the winter season is about sweet peas and poppies, because in California, you can plant these seeds in like December and they're blooming by March or April.
That's awesome. I've grown tomatoes too. That there's nothing like, they don't taste like anything you get in the store. That's for sure. They're so amazing. Do you have
highest bang for your buck by far?
Yeah. Would you have, what's your favorite? Do you have a couple favorites?
Yeah, my favorites in Northern California were the green zebra. That one did really well up there. Down here, it was not as good. And so this is my first season growing in Los Angeles. And the winners down here were probably one called Dino Egg, which is like an heirloom hybrid or new heirloom tomato. And then I think my other favorite are the orange-red bicolors. So Mr. Stripey was the winner of that section.
That's awesome.
On the tomato note, I planted a box out front, and it's a great way to get to know your neighbors. If you plant, cherry tomatoes that everyone feels comfortable grabbing one off. Very awesome. Community building experience.
Yes. So I wanted to just open the floor up to you guys, and if just raise your hand. We won't go around in order again, but if there's a resonating, well, we've got a lot of people here, families with Parkinson's in attendance. So if there's a resonating message or observation or thought that you'd like to share with our Parkinson's community, I'm going to open the floor up for any of the doctors who would like to share a thought or an observation.
I can say that and it is something basically to the question of what would I want to share with the community, which is that having a movement disorders neurologist as your neurologist, if you have Parkinson's, is valuable because of all of the little things that go along with Parkinson's that we kind of are practiced in discussing piece by piece. And so there's a lot we can do to help just with the sort of regular day-to-day things that that we're trained specifically for. So from things like diet and non-motor symptoms, autonomic symptoms like bladder issues and things like that, that we can really get into detail with you over and spend plenty of time sort of, because they're all connected to Parkinson's. So, if you weren't already aware that movement disorders specialists kind of cover those issues too, we do. And I definitely want to share that and make sure everybody who has Parkinson's or has a family member with Parkinson's knows that.
That's great. That's great. Sometimes these little nuggets of information are life-changing and definitely life-improving. And really what we're here for is to optimize our quality of life. And on behalf of the community, I want to thank all of you for what you do. It's obvious that everybody is very thoughtful about the way they all the doctors here are very thoughtful about their career and how they manage their patients, and that's really nice. Anybody else have a comment or thought they'd like to share with the community? We've got a lot of questions too, so if not, we'll jump in there. Okay. Before we get into the questions, quick comment from Art: do not use rose fertilizer with weed killer. Not sure whether that means it's combustible or what, but just a word of caution there. All right. So Art also asked, what is your opinion of televisits versus office visits?
I mean, we largely adopted televisits during COVID, but one thing that we found in our department was that of all of the specialties of neurology, movement disorders was best compatible with televisits, because a lot of, 90% of the pertinent stuff you can see, with a good enough video connection. So, but in the presently, it's a matter of convenience for some people who have difficulty, perhaps, driving across town and things like that. We can have more frequent interaction and more sort of relaxing visit to. You can use the whole hour and a half, or what have you, to talk about all those little things. Not every visit should be a televisit all the time, but I think they have a place, especially in Parkinson's, because we may need to keep in touch relatively frequently, maybe every 4 months, or in some cases earlier. But it becomes a drag for people to all the transportation, and especially in Los Angeles with traffic and everything like that. But that's my feeling about it. That televisits are not that bad for Parkinson's.
That's great. Do you reach out to patients' GP to coordinate the treatments, or do you expect the GP to come to you? How do you work with other doctors of other disciplines, or do you? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Wong.
So I certainly take responsibility for all the medications that I'm prescribing and recommending, and will prescribe those, titrate those, and review your med list to make sure there's nothing kind of problematic there. Through our medical record system, most people can kind of electronically send a note to the PCP, and that's works most. I assume that works. Honestly, the breakdown is usually in the medical system, and it's unclear often if the PCP receives the note or not. For very notable changes, or when I really need the PCP to help me with something, I ask my office to kind of take the next step and just, regardless what the EMR is doing, to physically fax my note to the PCP. But I will say, I think if you have a PCP outside of the system where your neurologist is located, it can be very challenging to communicate with the PCPs.
What are your primary research interests? Anyone?
Actually, Patrick, maybe I'll just speak to something about the communication.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Because it's just so important. And I think one of the things that I've been learning over the last couple of years is how easily, like Dr. Wong said, it can break down. So sometimes what I suggest to people is that they actually call our office and get a printout of their note, the week after their appointment. And the next time they see their primary care doctor, that they bring that note to them, just in case as a secondary background. But the idea of always facilitating communication between your different physicians, it shouldn't be your job. But if you want to, if you want to strengthen those lines of communication, that's a role that you can actually take on yourself.
That's awesome. And actually, that leads me to a thought. Maybe could you address how individuals should prepare for their doctor's visits? What makes your job easier?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think the most important thing is to know what you're taking when you're taking it. Because so much of what we do is adjust medications, and it's hard to know how to help adjust medications if we don't know where they start. So that's sort of a basic but really important and sometimes really complicated thing in Parkinson's. And it's not just, I take Sinemet 3 times a day, but do I take it at what hours, and is that pretty reliable, and is the rest of my routine reliable, and all these little details that we ask about. And that's why we have to spend a lot of time, is you can't just say, take a pill once a day, bye. So those kinds of details, even if we have it written down, how many times you take your medicine and how we think you should best take it, everybody has different experiences and they change it day to day. And that's a very important part of dealing with Parkinson's. And so we keep asking you again and again how you're taking your medicines, because we want to give the best advice to how to adjust it. So I think that's really important. And then thinking about what is it that you wish you were doing better. Sometimes, you know, in the throes of life, it's hard to think about those things, but when you come to the visit, that's really what we want to help you with. What is bothering you, and what is happening day to day that we might be able to help you with. So those are the big picture things that I like to get really detailed into.
I agree with Dr. Cross. I think what I tell my patients is I can help you kind of figure out if it's a Parkinson's symptom or not, if it's related to your medications or not, but only if we have the starting point that Dr. Cross described, where you have to bring me the observational data about what is happening and how it may or may not correlate with your medications.
Do you have patients that come in with this all written down?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I would just say one more thing is don't come to your appointment alone if you can avoid it. If you have a partner in your life, then I think you always get better care when you come with that person. And two heads are better than one, and two people remembering things is better than one. And even if you have a friend or a caregiver who, if you don't have a partner that can come with you to the appointment, I think it's always very helpful to have that second opinion sometimes, and then somebody else remembering what the conversation.
Is it known why or how carbidopa levodopa causes dyskinesia? Is there any way to diminish dyskinesia other than diminishing carbidopa levodopa?
You know, I think it's not 100% clear, but our understanding of what is going on is that as your natural dopamine that you make in your brain gets lower, kind of the sweet spot for when you have enough levodopa, but not too much levodopa, gets more narrow. So early on, you've got a wide sweet spot. And then as time goes on, for many people, that sweet spot gets narrower. But the tools that we have to deliver the levodopa to your brain remain the same. So they remain Cinemat and a couple other different kinds of pills. And so as that target gets harder as that needle gets harder to thread, but we have the same levels of medications that we're dealing with, it usually causes overshoot and undershoot. And overshoot is dyskinesias, and undershoot is wearing off and motor fluctuations. So that's the challenge. And that is why, you know, we have pills that I refer to as boosters that aren't levodopa, but kind of help the levodopa hang around longer, last longer, kind of work on other systems besides the dopamine system to try and adjust this. But fundamentally, we're working with kind of a thinner target band, but with the same tools. So that's why that's my understanding of why the dyskinesias happen.
So I had a question. I was speaking with a client about this, and he was curious as to how you encourage patients to do more. How do you encourage your patients to do more? And I imagine, I said, do you mean like becoming more proactive in the management? He said, no, just have them do more. But I kind of think that that's what he was speaking to do more that they can for themselves. How do you encourage them to do more for themselves?
I think building your community, as we've kind of talked about, engaging, you know, having family members come to your appointments and kind of hear what the discussion is, what sort of challenges and strategies you can do to address those things. So I think the more people you have kind of engaged with in your care, it sort of encourages you to reach those goals a bit more.
So I've got Paul saying, I exercise with tennis and pickleball. Does exercise produce the much needed dopamine? And if so, how much can it stay in my system?
I mean, exercise is well known to sort of boost dopamine levels. And as of now, I think it's the one thing, particularly aerobic exercise, that's sort of known to slow the progression of Parkinson's. And, you know, sort of studies are out comparing whether it needs to be moderate or high intensity and how long. But definitely exercise is known to be, increases dopamine and also maybe protective of the dopamine neurons.
What research endeavors that you are aware of for the possible treatment of Parkinson's do you find exciting or interesting?
We're at a very interesting point right now where we're beginning to identify biomarkers, things that we can measure in the blood or in the brain that can identify people with Parkinson's disease earlier, perhaps even sooner than they develop symptoms. And so this is for me the most exciting current avenue of research, because it opens up the field to early intervention. What can we introduce sooner to either slow the progression of disease or minimize symptoms before things become bothersome and functionally disabling? So this is it's really been emerging in the last 6 to 12 months. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it over the next 2 years and really implementing these things in practice.
What are the best or available treatments for tremors and balance?
So balance, I think physical therapy, this is where we get to that multidisciplinary care. So physical therapy and retraining the brain, learning how to compensate for some of the balance problems, coming up with new safety strategies, helping with devices if you need that. So helping with Cinemed and all of those dopamine things can help mobility generally, but the actual balance reflexes don't seem to be improved by those medicines. So we also have to use these other strategies to improve those reflexes. And tremor, all of the dopamine agents may or may not help. And DBS is sometimes used when those medications are not as helpful. But we have a large toolbox that sort of all target that dopamine pathway, and many of those therapies are going to be worth trying depending on the situation for tremor.
Then I also just wanted to give another plug for exercise, just because I definitely have had patients who, sometimes I sound like a broken record at each visit. I'm like, are you exercising? Are you exercising? And then some of my patients will, one of them got like a full kind of equipment set in his home and started exercising regularly. And it was incredible, I think, the amount of kind of improvement he felt in a lot of his symptoms. So just another plug.
That's awesome. Some of you know that's kind of my wheelhouse, and I'll just share that the American College of Sports Medicine, which is the ultimate authority on exercise referred to by physical therapists and athletic trainers, came out with a prescription for exercise for Parkinson's that recommends basically the same for the general population, which is 30 minutes 5 times a week. So that's 150 minutes at 70% of your maximum heart rate. You can just Google that, find out what it is. But I'll qualify that with saying that people that are sedentary, maybe even 2 or 3 minutes of movement is going to be enough to get started. So that's just some relevant information that was currently published by the American College of Sports Medicine. How do you address issues interacting with the care partners? And Judy, if you want to pop off mute and clarify in any manner, go ahead.
Yes, I think a lot of times, thank you, Patrick. A lot of times care partners, if they go for an appointment, they feel that they may not be heard. And I'm curious how you approach that when you have the person with Parkinson's saying, when you ask them how they're doing and they say, I'm doing great. And then you see the face of the care partner that clearly shows that may not be what's really going on. How do you approach that? It's a very sensitive area. I know that from experience, and I hear it in my groups pretty regularly as well.
I personally take it on a case by case. I usually will ask the care partner, you made a face. What do you think? Unless there's some dynamic where that would be upsetting to the patient, but usually I dive right in basically, or other, if not possible, to ask directly, kind of probe that question more with the patient themselves at least, and use the face that the care partner made as a clue that there's more there, and kind of dig a little deeper.
Thank you.
I think I always preface the visits when as Xenos said, it's really helpful to have other observers. So I always sort of just talk to both whoever is present, that, people who experience the symptoms may have different, it'll be a different experience than people who are observing it. And it's affecting each person in the environment differently. And it's always helpful to get the observations and sort of ask permission and set the stage for it to be okay for that interaction to be happening. And if setting the stage is doesn't work, if the patient really doesn't want that to happen, then, you know, you have to respect that. But that almost never happens. So as long as sort of everybody knows this is all to sort of help you feel better, and other people's observations are really helpful in helping me help you, that usually makes those conversations fluid.
And then just to add to that, one of the questions from earlier is like, you know, what can patients or families do kind of beforehand so that, you know, we're as physicians equipped to help you the most. And some of my patients will come in with kind of a list of, you know, things that they want addressed, and they will have discussed that list beforehand with their care partner. And so, you know, everyone is sort of on the same page with that. And then it's really helpful for me when I'm agenda setting for the visit to go through kind of that list with them.
This is so important, and yeah, it's worth spending a couple extra minutes on. That I would say two additional things. One is that I think a lot of anxiety comes from the idea that we get a small impression of your lives in a 30 or 45-minute appointment, and that we come away thinking things are different than they are in reality. And so part of relieving that anxiety, I think, is to explain to everybody, my patient, you know, and the caregiver, that the context is appreciated and important, and that's really a vital part of the visit, is for us to get some kind of glimpse into what your actual life is, and just let everybody know that, you know, we're not seeing you in this moment and thinking this is how you are all the time. And the other related to that is that the interpersonal dynamics are complicated, and I think we appreciate that. And so when guidance is asked of us, we can always provide it. And part of that is recognizing that caregiving is really, really complicated, and that takes support too. And we can offer resources for that when it's asked for.
You know, I'm really struck by, and I guess I've known this, but haven't really verbalized it or observed it, and not really labeled it. It seems to me that a doctor's appointment with your neurologist for someone with Parkinson's is really different than an appointment where you might go in if you have like a spine issue or a knee issue or some sort of other health issue. It's much more diverse, and I can really see how having your care partner there with you will make that time together way more valuable, because there's so many other issues you're having to kind of digest and address and understand. So I guess I was just struck by the fact that these doctor's appointments with you folks, it's different. And it's important, I think, to have the most the best outcome from that time together. And it seems to me that it would make sense to have a care partner there if possible. Do you encourage patients to use symptom tracking, motor and non-motor?
I think it depends on the person too. For some people, you know, having trackers is helpful for them. They find that, you know, it's not something which is anxiety provoking. There are some people that using these kinds of trackers, it can sort of take over living your life, and you become a little bit consumed by tracking certain things. So it really depends on the person and what works for you. Some people are really good at the technology and find that helpful, and some people it can be cumbersome. So I would say just find a strategy that works for you, and this is where care partners also can kind of help participate in maybe setting up a system to sort of track symptoms.
Do each of your hospitals provide exercises, groups specific for specific PT for Parkinson's patients? And let me toss PCLA a plug as well. We have a huge resource list of these sorts of things at PCLA.org. So reference there as well. But if your hospitals have that available, I'm going to toss it out to you guys. And
yeah, so I'll take USC. So at USC, we have definitely PTs that are specialized in neuro PT. There's a whole neuro PT training program that exists in our physical therapy department. So they're really attuned to the needs of our neurologic patients. We have one exercise class that is kind of a drop-in exercise class that happens nearby at the Plaza de la Raza, which is free and open to everyone with a focus on Parkinson's and neurologic disorders. but no other specific exercise classes besides PT that I know of. And then in terms of support groups, we have a DBS support group that meets monthly, and we have a PD social worker that runs a kind of a small support group as well.
By the way, support groups are great places to learn and to get resources and to find out who's good out there at doing the exercise or the physical therapy. You know, if you get a prescription for physical therapy, pretty much any studio will take you, but you want to make sure that you're going to a place that knows Parkinson's. Keep that in mind. And the community here is a great resource for finding people in your area that know what they're doing.
Yeah, on that note, I was going to say, I mean, Cedars Sinai does have physical therapists, some of whom are specialized in Parkinson's. But usually what I do is, because people kind of come from far and wide in town, and you don't want to have to drive an hour to go to a physical therapy appointment that you may go to twice a week, we sort of keep a list of private physical therapists that do have specific training in Parkinson's, and we kind of use those first.
Great.
Yeah, at UCLA, our approach is similar. We do have physical therapy, and there are some neurologically trained people. We partner actually a lot with Reactive Physical Therapy, which is a private group in West LA and Torrance. And they have fellows who come to our clinics as well, and we interact with them frequently. And then also, I think most important is the local physical therapists who have training, and because again, physical therapy is important and it needs to be easy to get.
Okay, great. So we're going to move into questions from the community now.
Dr. Cross, could you repeat the name of the physical therapy that specializes in Parkinson's in Torrance and West LA?
Reactive PT, REACTIVE. But a lot of anybody who has neurologic and it's not specific to vestibular care will often have a lot of experience with Parkinson's disease. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's two primary. There's the POWER Parkinson Wellness Recovery Continuing Education for Physical Therapists, and then there's the LSVT BIG, which are supplemental continuing education programs that the physical therapists will sometimes use and get certified in. Reactive is great. We know them. They use POWER, and it's a great program.
Yes, it's very interesting conversation. The one thing that I find to be a real bother is the fact that we do all these things with physical things associated with Parkinson's. I'm a Parkinson's victim, and what we don't seem to do is enough in my mind on the mental side, in terms of the anxiety it causes. I mean, I used to fall a lot, but I've kind of got into a routine and different ways of stopping that. But when I was falling, I would have a terrible anxiety attack in getting up and getting back into the house or wherever I was. And then that leads to, actually being really depressed, because I'm at home all day on my own, because my wife's a teacher and she's not there. She's teaching in school. So my question is, what should I be looking for in terms of the mental side of having a condition like Parkinson's?
I can answer that one. I mean, I think you're preaching to the choir here. I think we all would agree that mood and cognitive symptoms are fully wrapped up in kind of your motor performance. And I would say we often experience the opposite, that we're having to convince people that there is a mood problem, or that there is, some mild cognitive impairment that is creeping in around the edges. So I agree with you. I think that sometimes those mood symptoms get better with just Carbidopa, Levodopa with your Parkinson's treatment, but oftentimes it requires a more targeted treatment. And the way I explain it to people is that your brain is changing. Dopamine is the most obvious change that's going on in your brain, but we know other neurotransmitters are involved as well. And those other neurotransmitters are responsible for things like cognition and mood. So it's less about it being a primary mood disorder and more about it being a result of changes in your brain. So I agree with you. I think they do affect each other. And I'm sure all of us here have that on our list of things to ask
But it
people
makes,
about.
makes everything about PD extremely complicated. If you try one thing and it seems to work, a day later it doesn't work. You know, just like taking Levodopa, it's very hard to, judge the off period. When should I take the tablet to try and cover that the best? Well, there is no answer to that because it varies every day.
It does. And I think that gets to the question of like symptom trackers and what we ask people to pay attention to. And I think that I agree with Dr. Tamadonfar. It's like, we want you to pay attention, but we also don't want you to drive yourself crazy. And so we don't probably make changes on one-off things or things that haven't yet become a trend or become a pattern. So we do encourage you to pay attention to these fluctuations, but I think that kind of every single little data point is less helpful than a big picture for a week or a big picture for like evenings or mornings or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah, I
great.
think just one more comment and I'll stop talking. I think if we were able to get more people worldwide to actually give this data into the professionals, in the clinicians, and perform some sort of artificial intelligence with advanced analytics, and we would be able to have things pop out of that would give you at least a clue, not to give you necessarily the solution. A clue is good because you've got something to work with. But I don't see a lot of interest in that. In all the research I've done because I've had this since 2016, and all the research I've done, it doesn't seem to be much of a, an effort to do that. Anyway, thank you all for the meeting.
Thank you for that, Steve. Heather Kennedy.
Hi, thank you, Patrick and Judy and everyone that set this up. What a brilliant group of young people. I just can't believe how smart you guys need bodyguards for your brains in here. Thank you for your work. I wanted to ask a question about interacting with front office staff and other staff to get to you. I have the hardest time. Sometimes I'll be stuttering or cluttering my words and they think that I'm upset. They'll be like, calm down, or why are you yelling? Or why are you talking so fast? And I would think that they would know by a certain period of time that like, that's part of our deal. Sometimes I'm a little manic, like right now I have had too much dopamine. Usually I'm stiff and frozen. I look like I've had some kind of a stroke or something. So how do you train your front office and your front desk people? And how can we communicate more clearly with them? Thank you so much.
What a great question. I'll speak to UCLA a little bit. We have a big neurology department and a big staff, and the staff is changing. So while you might think that they are really familiar with Parkinson's, some people might be and some people might not be. And so I guess I would say what I would hope is that you would give me that feedback so I can share it with them, or give somebody else in the office, because I think everybody there wants to give you the best experience and may just not know how to do it. So I think the first step to solving that problem is getting that feedback, and we're all really eager to make everybody do as well at their job as they can do. And that's a really important part of taking care of people, is making sure that their needs are met from when they enter to when they leave. So let us know. That's what I would say.
That's a great question, Heather, and what a great answer, Dr. Cross, as well.
Okay, question about stress. I notice that stress exasperates my symptoms. Any recommendations besides a good therapist?
Thanks,
You're
Art.
not alone. You're not alone. I think that's universal, or near universal. So talk to us about it. There are various strategies you can take. One is specific medications. The other is either a psychologist or sometimes a social worker can be helpful. But chronic symptom management and the coping strategies that you can take after your diagnosis and for certain symptoms, those aren't always intuitive. So talking to somebody with specific expertise there can be helpful. And we can sometimes help connect you with those people.
That's great. I'll just toss it out there as well. Support groups have oftentimes provided the community that people are looking for. They're not right for everyone. Support groups aren't, and there's no right or wrong answer as to whether or not it's right for you. That's the question that you answer. And like I said, you should not be forced or pushed to go into a support group. Sometimes it scares people, but it's also, it provides community, and it can be reassuring to know you're not the only one struggling with some of these issues. So thank you again, doctors, and thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, registrants will receive a recording of today's presentation along with contact information for all doctors. Today's event was made possible by our sponsor, Medtronic. We have some wonderful events coming up, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But if you enjoyed today's program, please, please, please visit PCLA.org and make your donation today. By donating to PCLA, you can join us in our mission to improve the lives of families in our community living with Parkinson's. PCLA is a nonprofit, and all donations are tax deductible. Yay! Our upcoming programming events are really great. On Wednesday night, October 4th, we'll be hosting Let's Taco Parkinson's. It's an in-person outdoor fundraising event featuring guest speaker, Dr. Elliot Hogg from Cedars, Sinai. We will unite as a community, share stories, enjoy good food and drinks. Tickets are limited, so visit PCLA.org and purchase yours today. Lastly, on Friday, October 6th, join us to learn more about the latest advances in DBS and Parkinson's treatments. Links to register for these events, as well as updates for all of our programs, will be sent out to our email list, and you can sign up, or you can just visit PCLA.org for more information. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, doctors. This was awesome, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, doctors. Amazing presentation.